Yá'át'ééh, my relatives. Good morning. This is Mark Charles. It is Thursday, March 3rd, and I'm sitting down here with my second cup of coffee, and I'm very excited because this morning I have a friend joining me. Leroy Barber is going to jump on and drink some coffee with me. We're going to have a conversation today about his work to elevate voices of color, as well as the systemic racism and the lawsuit filed against the NFL just the other day, and so we're going to have a discussion about that. But before we began, let me do as I always do by acknowledging the people whose land I'm on. So I moved with my family about 6.5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, to from the Navajo Nation to Washington D.C., and these are the traditional lands of the Piscataway. And I want to honor the Piscataway as the host people of these lands. I want to thank them for their stewardship of these lands, and I want to state just how humbled I am to be living on these lands today. So thank you, my Piscataway relatives, and I want to thank everybody for joining me this morning. I see we have Debbie Moore here. We have Phil Fox is on. We have Rox B. Adam is here. So thank you, everybody, for jumping on. I'm really looking forward to this conversation we're going to have this morning with Leroy Barber. And before I bring him on, I just want to highlight one piece of news this morning. And this is going to kind of kick off our conversation, but I'll put this in the comment section. If you heard yesterday, the Washington D.C. football team came out with a new mascot and a new name, and they are no longer the racist white supremacist name they had previously, but now they are known as the Washington Commanders. And so that was good news to hear yesterday. I'm putting in a link from Native News Online where they got kind of reaction from Indian country because, right, it's been our Native leaders, people like Suzanne Harjo and others who have been working so long and so hard to get this name changed. And so, it was a good day in Indian country yesterday to have that name finally be changed. I will tell you though, I will be watching because I want to make sure they don't portray their commander as a white person, right? We have to. Let's not just go from a racist mascot of person of color to a commander who's now white. So we have to make sure that they have some equity in there too. But we'll be watching to see how that comes out. Let me go ahead and bring my good friend Leroy on now. And he is actually joining me today. He lives in Portland, Oregon, but he is in Seattle, Washington, doing some work up there. And for those of you who haven't met Leroy yet, he is a very good friend of mine. Leroy and I met over 10 years ago through our work within the Christian Community Development Association, as well as through some work we did together with Sojourners. And he has become one of my best friends. He and I have done a lot of work together. I really admire the stuff that he's doing. Leroy is an author. This is one of his books, Red, Brown, Yellow, Black, and White, Who's More Precious in God's Sight, is one of the books he's written. He's also written several other books. I encourage you to look for him at Amazon or in other bookstores and get into some of the stuff that he's written and things he's put out there. But one of Leroy's passions is he loves and works very hard to elevate the voices of people of color. And he has a project, he has an organization he and his wife run together called Voices, and they work tirelessly to elevate voices of color. He's also done a lot of really good things. One of the things he does that's fun is he every year for the past several years he's done Black Santa, and he dresses up as Santa and goes out to allow kids to come and visit, and he goes to different places just like any other Santa would, but he goes as Black Santa. And he does this and I'll let him talk more about this too, but he does this to allow people to see different reflections of what we normally see as cultural icons. And so yesterday, and what we're going to be talking about most in depth today, is the lawsuit that was filed against the NFL, accusing them of racism, systemic racism, and discrimination. And Leroy is also an avid NFL fan. He lives and dies by the Cowboys, and his wife is a huge Philadelphia Eagles fan, and so they always have some rivalry. between them, but he is an avid Cowboys and NFL football fan. But he doesn't buy into everything, and he actually did a protest of the NFL a few years ago, and I'll let him talk more about that. So, Leroy, thanks for getting on. I welcome you to expand on anything you like of how I introduced you, and would love to let my audience get to know you a little bit here.
Oh, good morning. Well, first of all, let me just say it's not my second cup of coffee. I'm in Portland, Oregon, uh, so Mark asked me to come on. It's my first cup of coffee, and I'm not done it yet. So let's just get that so folks know I set an early time zone here, but
Yeah.
happy to be on. And yes, Mark and I are really good friends and have been for a while. And uh, I think thank you for highlighting the Voices Project. That's a big part of our work, and really the mission, if you will, of that is to promote leaders of color, and we do that in various ways. We have a publishing arm where we publish writers of color. We do a couple gatherings a year. We do a student gathering. We have a mentorship piece. So whatever we can do, wherever we kind of see there's a need for leaders of color to be promoted or lifted or their voices brought to the table. We try to do that, and so that piece and Black Santa kind of goes along with that. It's this idea of representation. You would be surprised at how many adults come to see Black Santa. It's quite fascinating. Like no kids just coming because they're like, oh, I've just never seen a Black Santa. Thank you. So it's not about Santa per se. In so many ways, it's about folks seeing themselves and being represented in whatever way they can. So that's that. And yes, I am a Cowboys fan. Uh, I'm not home. If I was home right now, you'd see how much of a Cowboy fan I am. Uh, and I don't know the land of which I'm on right now, but in Portland, we're on the land of Chinook, and so honoring them for being the original stewards of that land where I live. So that's me. Yeah, I'm ready to get into some NFL talk here.
Great. Well, hey, Leroy, thank you for introducing yourself. I want to share this article that ran, and there's been several articles if you're following the news, but yesterday or a couple of days ago, it was on actually February 1st, the first day of Black History Month. Brian Flores, who was head coach of the Miami Dolphins, he filed a lawsuit against the NFL, accusing them of discriminatory practices, especially in their hiring, in their executive offices and their administrative offices, and in their coaching positions. And the lawsuit, which I'll share with you in a few minutes, has some pretty, I guess I would say, damning details in it,
Hmm.
where it basically gives, it's a 58-page lawsuit that was filed, and it gives a lot of evidence of ways that coaches, black coaches especially, are discriminated against within the NFL. And there's a lot of things that we need to talk about regarding this, because the NFL, which the Super Bowl is coming up, right? This is the highlight of the media for our nation. I mean, the NFL is one of the biggest events our country does on an annual basis. Tickets this year for the Super Bowl are selling at $10,000 a piece. It is the event to be at. It is the event to perform at. It is one of the most sacred gatherings our nation has, as it in the in our
Hmm.
colonizing exploitative
Right.
values. The Super Bowl is kind of the epitome of all of that. And the NFL very much so. And so one of the things that Brian points out in his lawsuit is that the owners, the 32 teams of the NFL, are all owned by white men, and 70% of the players are black. And so again, this immediately just creates this very strong racial dichotomy. And he lists. Let me share this other article with you. So in this, the NPR article I just shared with you, and he has there's a lot of good links in the article. It says Flores alleges in the suit that the NFL is racially segregated and managed like a plantation, charging that its 32 owners, none of whom are black, profit from the labor of its players, 70% of whom are African American. And so I'm going to give you a link to the Twitter account of the law firm that filed the lawsuit. And if you go to that Twitter account, you'll be able to actually bring up the 58 pages in a PDF file and you can read the lawsuit. And then just to kind of get the conversation going here,
Uh-huh.
of course, the NFL responded within hours of issued a statement. And basically, in their statement, they denied that they were racist. And I'm going to give you a link to their Twitter account, and then I'm going to put their statement both in the comments as well as on the screen here. So let me see if I can get this here. So, so here's the statement. This is their statement on the Brian Flores suit. It says the NFL and our clubs are deeply committed to ensuring equitable employment practices and continue to make progress in providing equitable opportunities throughout our organizations. Diversity is core to everything. And it goes on. This is what's showing on the screen. Diversity is core to everything we do, and there are few issues on which our clubs and internal leadership spend more time. We will defend against these claims, which are without merit. So, Leroy, let me give you a few minutes just to respond to what I've laid out here. I'd love to get your take. Being an avid NFL fan, I'd love to get your take on some of this.
So just so folks know, I am an avid fan, uh, uh, and have been since childhood. But when it comes time to to boycott, to put up, or or to not participate, I am definitely in. A few years ago, when Colin Kaepernick was kneeling, and I boycotted for a year and went around the stadiums and sat outside of those stadiums, kneeled outside of those stadiums, and didn't watch a game. And so one of the things I'm weighing is, am I going to be called to another boycott, right? Because when statements like this come out, they're window dressing, and the window dressing. Do you think the window dressing is for whom? Right? You got to ask yourself these questions, right? Who is this statement for? This statement is empty. This statement is fairly meaningless, right? And it's window dressing so that their constituencies um, can be satisfied, right? These owners are smart enough to know that, but the statement itself does nothing. Now, if you know anything about the NFL, you know about 20 years ago now, or maybe even a little more, they came up with what they call the Rooney Rule, right? Because they knew 20 years ago or more that they had a problem where they were not seeing the number of head coaches, black head coaches, getting hired, and at that time, not even coming in for interviews. So the last big step they've made in this process was over 20 years ago, and nothing has changed. Right now, there's one black NFL coach, and the Rooney Rule again is that NFL dressing. So does Mark? Do you know the Malcolm X quote, um, that about the white man will try to satisfy us with symbolic victories, right? Rather than economic equity and real justice, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
so that quote by Malcolm X is very, very, right, applies right now, right? That this statement is a symbolic gesture. The Rooney Rule, which I supported early on, because uh, Tony Dungy in 1996, that rule is over 20, is about 25 years old. Got hired after that and began to hire other black coaches. It gave a little blip, but that's all it was, and right. And so now it has become a symbolic gesture. Um, and doesn't represent real justice. And so we've got to move into a different space. Now, here's the thing, Mark. Brian Flores will never coach again in the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah, that's he actually he acknowledged that when he filed the lawsuit that he was essentially ending his coaching career.
Yeah, he knows that, and everybody around knows. None of these 32 owners, none of them will hire him. I I would be floored if he got a job again.
Yeah, I want to go back to, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on to talk about this, right? Is because this is what happens when we elevate voices of color, right? And this is something that you're very aware of because of your work to elevate voices of color. Is when we put people of color on these stages so our voices can be heard. Whether it's Colin Kaepernick, whether it's Brian Flores, or whether it's other speakers or leaders or authors, right? Because those voices are such a threat to the status quo of our society, that one of the challenges is the system begins to work as you're working to elevate these voices. The system is working to tear them down and to diminish them, which is exactly what's happening, right? Brian Flores was rising in the ranks of coaching, but when he saw the discriminatory actions and when he experienced them firsthand, he came to the conclusion this is bigger than football, knowing this was going to cost him his job and his livelihood. But he still went forward, and I have so much admiration for that. That really impressed me about him.
Yeah. Now remember when that his statement says, "I was asked to lose games on purpose, and I refused. The owner wanted to give me $100,000 per loss, and he went with his integrity, right? And didn't follow that, and hence at the end of the season got fired. Even after a winning, he pulled his team. He actually had one of the longest winning streaks in NFL history. He was 1-7, and
Yeah.
they ended up with a winning record. That has never been done before. So
The New
even
York
that, he excelled this year.
the New York Times had an article that ran this morning stating how many white coaches were given third tries as head coaches at three different teams, even after having losing records um, at previous teams. And Brian Flores had 2 seasons of winning records at Miami before he was fired.
Mm.
And again, it's just this is the challenge that we're facing. One of the other things I wanted to bring up here, and I'm going to share this on the screen because I want to actually show people this. I want to show people this lawsuit, and there's a few comments that were made here. So if you can see this, this is now the lawsuit, the PDF of the lawsuit. This is the statement he made in line 4. Are in the fourth statement of where he said, in critical ways, the NFL is racially segregated and managed much like a plantation. Its 32 owners, none of whom are black, profit substantially from the labor of NFL players, 70% of whom are black. The owners watch the games from atop NFL stadiums in their luxury boxes, while their majority black workforce put their bodies on the line every Sunday, taking vicious hits and suffering debilitating injuries to their bodies and their brains, while the NFL and its owners reap billions of dollars. Now, again, so this is the environment where we have this. Oh, I didn't even show that. So sorry, here's the screen where that is. I forgot to click that on. So we have this environment where we have these incredibly wealthy white owners employing a majority of black labor force. And I want to go back 2 years. In 2020, some of you may not know this, but in 2020, the NFL was planning, this is before the pandemic, in January of 2020, they made this major announcement that they were going to have their draft in Las Vegas on the Strip in the Bellagio Lake. And they were going to set up a stage in the midst of that water with the fountains around it. And they were going to bring the players to the stage by a boat. Right now, if you have white landowning men owning these teams, employing these people, and you understand our nation's history with enslavement, and the fact that they planned this and they announced it and they promoted it, and everyone thought this was an incredible idea, and no one stopped to say, this is probably not the best optic we want to have. Right? This just shows you how deeply implicit this bias is here.
Right.
Second, in 2020, right, when there was lawsuits about brain injuries and players were trying to get compensation for brain injuries that they were suffering after years of playing in the league. And in 2020, the NFL decided to drop their race baseline for cognitive function, where they actually stated and ruled as that black players had a lower level of cognitive function to start with than their white players did. And so it was harder for black players to receive this compensation. And it was in 2020 they decided to drop that.
2020, right? 2020. Just take that in your mind, folks, right? That this mega corporation, right? This and next Sunday, the NFL, like that game is the largest event in the world. 300 million people or more will watch it. Right? So run by 32 white males. I think there's one owner of color, but a partial owner of color. So we're talking about a system that is, remember the baseline, it's exploitive, right? It is exploitive from the beginning. And it is exploitive in that it holds this, dangles this thing out that in a community that struggles, right, historically, right, like we know the history of black people in America, right, that struggles and dangles this carrot out of, hey, if you get to the NFL, right, you can care for your family in ways that you couldn't dream of, right? And then it goes to all of these, like I started as a little boy watching this, right? Most people start as little boys and little girls watching this sport. And this carrot dangled, get this American dream, or hey, get out of poverty. And you think people won't respond to that? You don't think that's exploitive, right?
Yeah.
And then at the other end, there's no dignity and justice at it, right? Yeah. So all along the continuum, it is exploitive.
Yeah. And that's the problem, right? And the challenge is, because this racism, this discriminatory practices is so implicit, right, that they didn't even catch themselves that they were going to take their 70% of their black players to this stage by a boat, right, and let them be drafted by their white owners, and that no one caught that imagery there. And then they, again, 2020, I just shared an article from the AP that they ended their race-based norming of cognitive function. And so for them to put out this denial in response to this lawsuit without any investigation, without any, just, no, that's not us, that's not what we're doing. I mean, this just shows you how not only is this system blatantly racist, but it's so implicit that they're not even aware, I would argue, of what they're doing. Like, it's just such a part of the way they see the world that they're not even aware of what they're doing half the time. And that's what I think is some of the most dangerous stuff out there. Absolutely. I know you have to go soon, Leroy. You have another meeting to jump on, but is there anything you want to end with before you jump off here?
I think we followed his coach. I think he is showing himself to be brave. He's showing himself to care for more than himself, right? And he knows he will probably never work in the field that he loves again at this level, right? We should follow him and see where he wants to go with this, because if he calls for a boycott, if he calls for us to sacrifice some kind of way, I'm in, and I would hope that others of you would join in that, right? We cannot
Yeah.
let this juggernaut just do whatever it wants to do. We have to dismantle some of this. And to the one black coach who coaches at Pittsburgh, we hope that he maybe in some way will come out against this and maybe hire him, right?
Yeah.
There are other ways to disrupt this system, which needs to be disrupted. So,
And I want to just point out that this is not just about the NFL, right?
oh,
The NFL is basically and
good
it's
point.
what our nation struggles with.
Yes,
And
very. Yeah,
so if we're going to address it in our nation, we absolutely need to address it in the NFL and vice versa. And so this is why it's not just about sports. This is about what we've done as a society. And Leroy, I want to thank you for being on with me today. I'm sorry if I appeared a bit distracted before. I'm doing kind of running this myself and trying to get all the links up and everything else. But having your voice on here, having your presence here has been really important today. I definitely am going to have you back on. You're a great friend. You're a brilliant thinker. I love the work you're doing to elevate voices of color and to create space for these types of conversations. And if you don't already follow Leroy Barber, find him on Twitter, find him on Facebook, follow his work. I put a link into the Voices Project website where you can find out more about his work there. Check out Black Santa if you're in Portland, Oregon next December. But yeah, Leroy, it's been great to have you here. And I also need to apologize. I think for the first session when you're introducing yourself, I had you on a small window because I
uh,
didn't know the right button to click. But thank you for being here. It's been an honor to have you here today. Thanks, Leroy.
thanks for having me, and let's have me on again, man. Let's as this progresses, let's build some momentum to bring some resistance. Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining me for a second cup of coffee. Leroy has to go. I'm going to stay on for a few more minutes, but yeah, Leroy, Hakona, thanks for joining us today. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for taking some time to join this conversation I had with Leroy this morning. Again, I apologize if I seemed a little distracted in that. I was trying to manage all of the finding the links and sharing them and getting them up ahead of time. But yeah, his voice is so important in this that I'm grateful that he was able to join me this morning. And I really want to have more guests like him on. There are so many incredible voices, men and women, who are doing incredible work out there. And I want to bring them onto this place. I want to sit down with them over a cup of coffee and have conversation about what they're doing and about what we need to be doing together. So let me look through the comments and see if I've missed anything. Tam, yes, I agree. We'd love to see Leroy Moore at Christmas. That'd be great to have. Debbie, thank you for listening into the conversation and joining us here. Adam, thank you for making some comments and for being a part of this dialogue here. Mo, thanks for joining from South Africa. It's really good to have you on with us today. This is an important conversation. And this is something we need to continue to talk more about because NFL is one of the biggest media events. The Super Bowl is one of the biggest media events in our nation. It literally is an idol. And it's almost like a worship service when we go and do this with the Super Bowl every year. And so we need to point out how deeply implicit and systemic this racism is within these institutions if we're going to ever deal with them on a good way at a national level. So thank you, everybody, for joining me today. And I will make sure I get this posted on my Instagram and up on my Patreon as well if you want to follow me there. Tomorrow, I'm going to be online over a second cup of coffee, and I'm going to have a conversation about some of the new tiers on my Patreon, as well as some of the plans and events I have coming up for the next week, and touching base on a few of the stories I've been following throughout this past week. So, my relatives, thank you for joining me. Walk in beauty, and may we learn how to walk in beauty together. Hakona.